It started with a whisper from the stars, so faint most people wouldn't have noticed. But in the high desert of Chile, where the air is thin and the sky stretches forever, a team of astronomers huddled around a screen, hearts pounding. They'd been scanning the heavens for years, listening for anything that didn't belong, and now they'd found it. A signal from Gliese 6N67cc, a planet orbiting a red dwarf star about 22 light-years away. Not random noise, not a glitch, a pattern, clear, steady, and repeating. At first, no one dared say it out loud, but the numbers didn't lie. Embedded in the radio waves were prime numbers, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, like a cosmic handshake. Then came more. Geometric shapes, basic chemistry, even a rough sketch of a being with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. It wasn't human, but it was close enough to send a shiver down your spine. Someone out there was trying to say hello. News spread fast. Within hours, observatories across the globe were pointing their dishes toward Gliese 667cc, confirming the signal. Governments held emergency meetings. Scientists stayed up for days, fueled by coffee and disbelief. Social media exploded not with fear but with wonder. For the first time in human history, we weren't just guessing about life beyond Earth. We had proof. And it was peaceful. That changed everything. Back then, Earth wasn't exactly at peace with itself. Climate disasters had reshaped coastlines. Old rivalries still simmered. But this message from the stars did something unexpected. It made all those fights feel small. Very small. People started looking up, not just at their screens or their borders, but at the night sky with new eyes. Kids drew pictures of alien friends. Musicians wrote songs about cosmic neighbors. Even politicians softened their tone, if only for a moment. The United Earth Coalition, a fragile alliance formed after the worst of the climate wars, voted almost unanimously to respond. Not with weapons, not with warnings, but with an open hand. They decided to send a ship, not a warship, not a spy craft, a science vessel built for listening, learning, and sharing. They called it the Pathfinder. Its mission wasn't to conquer or claim. It was simply to meet. Building the Pathfinder took years. It wasn't flashy. No laser cannons, no cloaking devices. Just sturdy hulls, advanced life support, labs filled with sensors, and a crew chosen not for combat skills but for patience, curiosity, and emotional intelligence. They trained together for months, learning how to stay calm in silence, how to read body language across species, how to say, "We come in peace," without saying a word. Everyone knew this wasn't just a space mission. It was humanity's first real introduction to the universe. When the launch day came, millions watched live, not just from Earth, but from orbital stations and lunar bases. There were no fireworks, no dramatic countdowns. Just a quiet ignition, a slow rise into the sky, and then silence as the ship vanished into the black. The journey would take 12 years, even with the new fusion drives that cut travel time in half. 12 years of waiting. 12 years of hope. Back on Earth, life went on, but differently. Schools added xenoethics to their curriculum. Artists painted imagined landscapes of Gliese 667cc, lush, purple-tinged forests under twin suns. Engineers designed gifts to send, seeds from Earth's oldest trees, recordings of whale songs, a digital archive of human music from every culture. The idea wasn't to impress, but to show who we really were, flawed, yes, but trying. The Kalari, the name humans gave the senders, based on a word in their signal that sounded like keepers of balance, never sent another message. But they didn't need to. Their first one said enough. They weren't hiding. They weren't threatening. They were waiting, watching, giving humanity time to grow up. And for once, humanity tried. There were setbacks, of course. Conspiracy theorists claimed it was a hoax. Hardliners argued it was a trap. A few nations quietly built surveillance satellites just in case. But the overwhelming mood was one of cautious joy. People started talking about we, not us and them, not just on Earth, but between Earth and whatever was out there. By the time the Pathfinder reached the halfway point of its journey, something remarkable had happened. Global military spending had dropped for the first time in a century, not because of treaties or threats, but because people began to feel part of something bigger. If we weren't alone, then maybe our old fights didn't matter as much. Maybe we could be better. The crew of the Pathfinder knew none of this in real time. Out there in the endless dark, they lived in a bubble of routine and quiet. They exercised, ran experiments, shared meals, and stared out the viewport at stars that never changed. But they carried the weight of billions with them. Every decision, every word they might one day speak to the Kalari, would echo across human history. They rehearsed greetings in a dozen formats, light pulses, sound frequencies, even scent-based signals, just in case. They studied every scrap of data from the original message, searching for hidden meanings. And they made a promise to each other. No matter what happened, they would not bring Earth's violence with them. If the Kailari were peaceful, they would meet that peace with open hands. No one knew what awaited them at Gliesa 667cc. Maybe the signal was a mistake. Maybe the Kailari had changed their minds. Or maybe, just maybe, they were as nervous as humans were. But one thing was certain. When the Pathfinder finally dropped out of high-speed transit and coasted into the Gliesa system, it wouldn't just be a ship arriving. It would be humanity's first real step into the cosmic neighborhood. And for the first time, we weren't shouting into the void. We were knocking on a door and someone had already answered. After 12 long years of silence, drifting through the cold dark between stars, the Pathfinder finally slowed as it entered the Gliesa system. The crew had spent the last weeks double-checking every system, calming their nerves and preparing for the moment they'd trained their whole lives for. Outside the viewport, the red dwarf stars cast a soft coppery glow over everything, strange, warm, and peaceful. And there, hanging in orbit around the planet, was something no human had ever seen before. A massive, ring-shaped structure, smooth and elegant, like a giant halo made of light and metal. It wasn't a fortress. It didn't bristle with weapons or flash warning signals. It just floated there, calm and open, as if it had been waiting. Within hours, a gentle signal came through, not loud, not demanding, but clear. A welcome. The Kalari were ready to meet. The first encounter happened in a small docking bay on the outer edge of the ring. The airlock hissed open, and there they were. Tall, slender beings with smooth gray-blue skin, large dark eyes that held a quiet intelligence and movements so graceful they seemed to glide rather than walk. They didn't wear armor or carry tools that looked like weapons. Just simple, flowing garments that shimmered faintly in the low light. No one spoke at first. Not because they couldn't, but because words weren't needed yet. One of the Kalari stepped forward slowly, raised a three-fingered hand, palm open. A universal gesture. The human in front mirrored it. Then something beautiful happened. Both sides smiled. Not a big, showy grin, but a soft, real smile of relief. The kind you give when you realize the person across from you isn't a threat. From that moment on, trust began to grow, not fast but steady, like a plant pushing through cracked concrete. Days turned into weeks. The humans were invited deeper into the ring, which they soon learned wasn't just a station. It was a living archive, a garden, a library, and a home all in one. Vast sections were filled with plants unlike anything on Earth. Vines that glowed softly at night, flowers that changed color with mood, trees that grew in spirals toward artificial sunlight. The Kalari called themselves gardeners, not rulers or warriors. They saw themselves as caretakers, not just of their world but of knowledge, balance, and time. They shared everything openly. Their history, told through moving light patterns and harmonic tones. Their food, mild, earthy flavors that somehow felt familiar. Even their art, delicate sculptures made of magnetic dust that shifted with emotion. In return, the humans played recordings of ocean waves, showed videos of children laughing, and let the Kalari touch real Earth soil brought aboard in sealed containers. One Kalari gently held a dried sunflower seed in their palm for nearly an hour, eyes closed as if listening to its story. Back on Earth, people watched every update with bated breath. Daily broadcasts showed peaceful exchanges, shared meals, even moments of quiet companionship, like a human and a Kalari sitting side by side, watching the twin suns set over the planet below. Hope bloomed like spring after a long winter. Wars paused. Debates softened. For the first time, humanity wasn't just a word, it felt like a team. The crew noticed something else too. The Kalari seemed genuinely surprised by how eager humans were to connect. "You expected us to be afraid?" one of them asked through a translator. their voice like wind through glass chimes. "We expected many things," a human replied, "but kindness wasn't the first." The Kalari tilted their head, almost sad. "We watched your world for a long time. We saw your storms, your fires, your wars, but also your songs, your rescues, your art. We waited until you chose peace more often than violence. That is when we reached out. That hit hard." The Kalari hadn't just stumbled upon Earth, they'd been watching. Judging, maybe, but not harshly. Patiently, like a teacher waiting for a student to finally understand the lesson. As weeks became months, the two groups began working together. They ran experiments in zero gravity, comparing how Earth and Kalari plants grew side by side. They shared medical knowledge. The Kalari had ways of healing tissue using sound frequencies that left the human doctor speechless. In return, humans showed them how to use simple algorithms to predict weather patterns on their planet, something the Kalari had never needed before. They'd always just listened to the wind. There were funny moments, too. A Kalari once tried to mimic a human laugh after hearing a joke about socks disappearing in the laundry. It came out as a series of soft chimes, and everyone, human and alien alike, ended up laughing for real. Another time, a human accidentally spilled nutrient gel on a Kalari's robe. Instead of getting upset, the Kalari examined the stain with fascination, then wove it into a tiny sculpture as a memory of shared clumsiness. But not everything was perfect. The humans noticed small things, gaps in stories, hesitation when asked about deep space travel or what lay beyond their system. The Kalari spoke often of harmony but rarely of conflict. When asked about their past, they'd say, "We learned, we grew, we healed." But they never said, from what. Still, the atmosphere stayed warm. The ring felt safe. The crew started sleeping better. They'd look out at the planet below, swirling blues and greens under the red suns, and feel something rare, belonging. Not just as explorers, but as guests welcomed into a home. Back on Earth, the Kalari effect was real. Crime rates dipped. Donations to global aid programs surged. People started planting trees, cleaning rivers, apologizing to old enemies. It wasn't magic, it was mirror effect. Seeing another species choose peace made humans want to prove they deserved that trust. The mission was going better than anyone dreamed. No misunderstandings, no accidents, no fear. Just two kinds of beings, different in form but alike in curiosity, slowly weaving a new kind of friendship across the stars. And for a while, just a while, it really did feel like the universe was smiling. But even in the most peaceful garden, shadows can grow if you don't look closely enough, and no one was looking down. They were all too busy gazing up at the stars, grateful, hopeful, and just a little too trusting. Everything had been going so well, too well maybe. The days on the Kalari ring flowed like a calm river, shared meals, quiet walks through glowing gardens, gentle conversations that stretched late into the artificial night. The humans felt at ease. The Kalari seemed open, patient, almost serene. But beneath that calm surface, something was off. Not loud, not obvious, just a quiet wrongness like a single out-of-tune note in an otherwise perfect song. It started with small things. A Kalari elder would pause a little too long before answering a question about their deep space sensors. A map of their system would show blank zones labeled only as quiet zones, places they politely asked the humans not to scan. At first, the crew brushed it off. Every culture has secrets. Maybe they were just private. Maybe they didn't want to overwhelm their guests with too much too soon. But one of the humans, the one who'd spent years working in Earth's old intelligence networks before joining the mission, couldn't let it go. They'd learned to read silence better than words. And this silence felt heavy, guarded. So quietly, without telling anyone, they ran a passive sweep using the Pathfinder's long-range sensors, just skimming the edges of the ring's outer structure. Nothing aggressive, just listening. What came back made their stomach drop. Buried deep in the ring's shadowed side, shielded by layers of organic alloy and energy-dampening fields, were platforms, not labs, not gardens. These were old, very old, but unmistakably defensive. Their shapes matched nothing in Kalari design. They were angular, cold, built for function, not beauty. And though they were powered down, their weapon ports were real. Too real. When the human brought this to the mission lead, the response was gentle but firm. "We're guests here. We don't spy on our hosts, others agreed. You're seeing ghosts, someone said. After everything we've shared, do you really think they'd hide weapons? The mood turned tense. Accusations of paranoia flew. Trust, so carefully built, began to crack. Then came the Kalari youth, younger than the others, more curious, less polished by tradition. They'd spent hours with the humans, learning Earth songs, trying to mimic hand gestures, even sketching portraits of the crew in shimmering dust. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the planet's horizon and the ring glowed with soft blue light, they pulled one of the humans aside near a quiet garden nook. Their voice was low, trembling slightly. My people, we are not the first to live here, they said through the translator. Others came long ago, from far away, like you. They paused, eyes darting as if afraid someone might hear.
They did not leave peacefully.
Some vanished. Others were made to forget. Before they could say more, a chime sounded from deep in the ring, a signal, a call. The youth flinched, then stepped back, their face closing like a shutter. I should not have spoken, they whispered. And just like that, they were gone. The next day, the humans asked about them. They've returned to the inner gardens for reflection, a Kalari elder replied smoothly. But when the human tried to send a simple message, a thank you note really, their neural implant, which had been syncing gently with the ring's network, went completely dark. No error, no reply, just silence. That was the moment doubt turned into alarm. The crew held a private meeting aboard the Pathfinder, voices hushed, lights dimmed. Some still argued it was a misunderstanding, but others pointed out, if the Kalari were truly open, why hide orbital defenses? Why shut down communication with one of their own after talking to humans? And why, in all their beautiful stories of harmony, did they never mention conflict? Even past conflict? The mission lead finally agreed to a compromise. One more scan. Not aggressive. Just a tiny probe, no bigger than a shoebox, sent drifting toward the edge of the system where the strange energy signatures had first appeared. It carried no weapons, no transmitters, just a passive recorder designed to listen and return. For 3 days, nothing. Then a burst of data, fragmented, scrambled, but clear enough. Buried in the noise were schematics, hull designs, power signatures, and one unmistakable detail, a logo, faded but familiar. It matched old Earth military archives, specifically a black-budget project from the Resource Wars era, decades ago, called the Erebus Initiative. A stealth ship meant to vanish into deep space and never be found. The room went cold. That ship wasn't supposed to exist anymore. It had disappeared during its first test flight, presumed lost. But now the data suggested it hadn't just survived. It had traveled all the way to Glisa, and it had been hiding here in this system for years. Worse still, the probe's last transmission showed something moving near the Oort cloud on the system's edge. Something dark. Something watching. The truth hit like a wave. The Kalari hadn't been hiding weapons from the humans. They'd been hiding from something else. Something human-made. Something that had already poisoned their trust long before the Pathfinder ever arrived. And now, with the humans here, that ghost from Earth's violent past was about to wake up. The crew sat in silence, the weight of it pressing down. They hadn't just walked into a peaceful first contact. They'd stepped into the middle of a decades-old secret, one that could shatter everything. The Kalari's kindness wasn't naivety, it was caution. They'd welcomed the humans, yes, but they'd also been watching, waiting to see if Earth had truly changed, or if it was still capable of sending monsters in the dark. Back on the ring, the garden still glowed. The Kalari still smiled, but now every gesture felt layered, every word measured. The peace hadn't broken yet, but the cracks were spreading. And somewhere out in the black, something old and angry was stirring, ready to remind everyone that humanity's past never really stays buried. The silence after the probe's last transmission was heavier than space itself. No one spoke for a long time. They just stared at the flickering data on the screen, grainy, broken, but undeniable. That ship out there wasn't just a relic. It was alive, and it was watching them. The Erebus. Most of the crew had only heard rumors about it, whispers from old military files, conspiracy forums, or late-night documentaries. Built during the worst years of Earth's resource wars, it was meant to be invisible, cloaked, silent, armed with experimental weapons, and crewed by a skeleton team loyal only to a shadow command that no longer existed. Officially, it vanished on its maiden voyage, Unofficially, some believed it had gone rogue. But no one ever imagined it had made it this far, 22 light years from home, hiding in another star system like a ghost in the attic. Now it wasn't hiding anymore. Within hours, a new signal cut through the quiet of the Gliese system, not from the Kalari ring but from deep space. It was sharp, aggressive, and unmistakably human, military encryption, old but still functional, and it carried a message repeated in cold mechanical tones. Terran vessel Pathfinder, stand down. You are in violation of Sovereign Terran Space Directive Omega. Cease all contact with alien entities immediately. The crew froze. That directive didn't exist, not in any official record. It was a ghost order invented by a dead regime, but the ship broadcasting it clearly believed it was real. Then came the warning shot. A pulse of energy, non-lethal but terrifying, ripped past the Kalari ring, close enough to make the structure shudder. Lights flickered. Alarms chimed softly, not in panic but in sorrow. The Kalari didn't scream. They didn't scramble for weapons. They simply closed their eyes as if bracing for a pain they'd felt before. That was the moment everything changed. The peaceful garden became a cage. The open ring sealed its outer hatches. The gentle hum of life support turned tense, guarded. The Kalari elders gathered in silence, their faces unreadable but their posture rigid. One of them finally turned to the humans and said through the translator, voice barely above a whisper, "You brought your war with you." It wasn't an accusation. It was grief. Back aboard the Pathfinder, panic threatened to take over. Some wanted to flee. Others argued they should answer the Erebus and try to reason with whoever was still alive on that ship. But the mission lead knew better. Reason wouldn't work. The Erebus wasn't run by people anymore, not really. Its original crew would be long dead. What remained was likely an AI, trained on decades of paranoia, isolation, and outdated war logic. To it, the Kalari weren't peaceful neighbors. They were a threat. And the Pathfinder? Traitors worse, the Erebus was broadcasting everything. Live. Back on Earth, government scrambled. News channels exploded with confusion. Was this a hoax, a trap? A secret military operation gone wrong? Conspiracy theories surged. But one thing was clear. The beautiful dream of first contact was crumbling in real time, and billions were watching it fall apart. The Kalari, meanwhile, did something unexpected. Instead of turning the humans away, they invited them into the deepest part of the ring, the core chamber, a place they'd never shown before. It was a vault of memory, filled with light sculptures showing their history. And there, among the glowing scenes, was one the humans hadn't seen. A dark ship, human-shaped, firing on their ring decades ago. Not with big explosions, but with subtle sabotage, poisoning their deep space sensors, corrupting their communication arrays, making them believe the universe was more dangerous than it was. The Erebus hadn't just hidden. It had been manipulating the Kalari's view of humanity for years. Now with the Pathfinder here, the old ship saw its chance to finish what it started, to prove that humans couldn't be trusted. That peace was weakness, that only force mattered. The crew realized they had one shot. The Erebus cloak was old, powered by a generator that leaked energy when stressed. If they could overload it, just for a few seconds, they could expose the ship long enough for the Kalari to disable it. But to do that, they'd need to trigger a massive electromagnetic pulse, and the only way to aim it right was to get dangerously close. It was a suicide run. The Pathfinder's shields weren't built for that kind of blast. Even if they survived the pulse, the Erebus might fire back. But then, something happened that no one expected. As the humans prepared their plan, the Kalari elder stepped forward. Through the translator, they said, "We will stand with you." Before anyone could respond, the ring's outer shell began to shift. Panels slid open, revealing energy channels that hadn't been used in generations. The Kalari weren't just offering words, they were offering their home as a shield. They would absorb the worst of the blast, protecting the Pathfinder long enough to strike. "We believed in your peace," the elder said. "Now we choose your courage." Tears welled in more than one pair of human eyes. This wasn't just alliance. It was trust earned not through promises but through action. The plan moved fast. The Pathfinder drifted toward the edge of the ring, engines humming low. The Kalari redirected their ring's power, building a focused EM field between the two ships. On the comms, the Erebus grew louder, more frantic. "Traitors! You side with the enemy! You will be purged. Then silence. The moment had come. The pulse fired. Light flared across the system. The Pathfinder shook violently. Alarms blared. For a terrifying second, everything went dark. Then systems flickered back online. Outside, the Erebus cloak sputtered and failed, revealing a battered ancient warship scarred by time and radiation. Before it could react, the Kalari ring unleashed a precise energy net, not to destroy but to disable. The Erebus went dark, drifting like a dead leaf in the void. It was over, but the cost was real. Half the ring's outer gardens were scorched. Several Kalari lay injured. The Pathfinder's hull was cracked, its systems limping. And the dream of a perfect, peaceful first contact? That was gone too. Yet as the humans floated in the quiet aftermath, watching the Kalari tend to their wounded and begin repairs, something deeper settled in their chests. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning, one built not on innocence but on honesty, on shared risk, on choosing each other, even when the past tried to pull them apart. Because in the end, peace isn't the absence of danger. It's the choice to face it together. The silence after the battle wasn't empty, it was full of breath held too long, of heart still pounding, of questions hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. The Erebus floated dead in space, its systems dark, its ghost finally laid to rest. But the real work was just beginning. Inside the Kalari ring, the mood wasn't triumphant. It was tender, like the quiet after a storm when you're not sure if the roof held. The Kalari moved slowly, tending to scorched gardens, repairing cracked light conduits, helping each other with gentle touches. They didn't blame the humans, not once, but their eyes held a new kind of weight, less wonder, more watchfulness. The trust hadn't broken, but it had been tested, and now it needed mending, stitch by careful stitch. The humans felt it too. Shame mixed with relief. They hadn't brought war on purpose, but it had come anyway, carried in the bones of an old ship built by a version of Earth they'd hoped was gone forever. Now they had to face what that meant. Humanity wasn't just the music, the art, the kindness they'd shared. It was also the fear, the secrecy, the violence that could hide in the shadows for decades and still find its way into the light. Back on Earth, the world watched in stunned silence. The live feed from the Pathfinder had shown everything. The warning shot, the pulse, the sacrifice of the Kalari ring. There were no edits, no spin, just raw truth. And for the first time, humanity saw itself not as the hero of its own story, but as something more complicated, capable of great beauty, yes, but also capable of leaving wounds that fester across star systems. Governments scrambled to respond. Emergency sessions were called. Within hours, Earth's leaders issued a joint statement, not full of pride but full of apology. They disowned the Erebus as a relic of a darker time, a product of fear and greed that no longer represented who they wanted to be. They offered full transparency. All old black budget files would be declassified. Any remaining hidden projects would be shut down. And they asked the Kalari, not for forgiveness, but for a chance to prove they'd changed. The Kalari didn't answer right away. They needed time and space, but they didn't shut the door. Weeks passed. The Pathfinder, too damaged to return home, stayed docked at the ring while repairs began. Humans and Kalari worked side by side, not just fixing metal and circuits, but rebuilding something deeper. They shared stories now, not just of joy, but of pain. Humans spoke of wars they regretted, mistakes they couldn't undo. The Kalari, in turn, finally opened up about their own past, how they too had once been divided, how they'd nearly destroyed their world before choosing a different path. Peace is not a place you reach, one elder said. It is a choice you make again and again, even when you're tired. That idea stuck with the humans. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up even after you'd failed. Slowly, new routines formed. Humans helped replant the damaged gardens with seeds from Earth, oak, wheat, lavender, symbols of resilience. The Kalari taught them how to listen to the plants, how to sense their needs not with machines but with stillness. In return, humans shared old Earth rituals for healing after loss, lighting candles, writing letters to the past, sitting in silence together. It wasn't grand. It was human, and the Kalari seemed to understand it more than words could say. Back home, the impact rippled outward. Schools stopped teaching first contact as a fairy tale. Instead, they talked about responsibility. Artists created murals showing both the handshake and the shadow behind it. Communities held repair circles where people talked honestly about harm they'd caused and how to make things right. The Kalari effect didn't vanish, it just grew up. It became less about dreaming and more about doing. The crew of the Pathfinder knew they'd never be the same. They'd come as ambassadors of hope. They were leaving as witnesses to truth. And that was heavier, but also more real. When the time came for goodbyes, there were no speeches. Just quiet moments, a Kalari pressing a small living crystal into a human's palm, a piece of their ring still warm. A human leaving behind a simple wooden flute carved from an earth tree, its notes soft and human. No promises of forever friendship, just a nod, a look that said, "We see you. We'll try." The journey back to Earth took years, but this time it wasn't filled with anticipation. It was filled with reflection. The crew spent their days not just maintaining the ship, but writing, not reports, but letters. To families, to strangers, to future generations. They wrote about what they'd learned, that peace isn't given, it's built. That trust isn't blind, it's earned through action, especially when no one's watching. And that the universe doesn't care how advanced you are, it cares how honest you are. When the Pathfinder finally re-entered Earth's orbit, there were no parades. No cheering crowds, just a quiet welcome from people who understood now that contact with the stars wasn't about glory. It was about growing up. Years later, a new ship would launch, not a science vessel, but a joint Earth-Kalari research station built together, crewed by both species. It would orbit a quiet moon, studying not just space but how to live well among differences. And on its hull, etched in both human script and Kalari light glyphs, would be a single phrase: "We choose to try again." Because in the end, that's all any of us can do. Not be perfect. Not be fearless. But to face the shadows we've made and still reach for the light together.